Hey guys, we'll be starting shortly. Just give us a second as we transition.
Yeah, so like Sahil mentioned, we'll be starting just shortly. I think Professor Danner is just trying to find the session right now. But I hope you guys all enjoyed the keynote that he delivered. I thought some of the things that were really interesting were his sort of talk about like California highways. It was also really great to see so much engagement in the chat. And yeah, so like Arian said, feel free to just start posting questions now, and we can take them one by one. If you'd like to just share your question by via like audio, also feel free to like request to join. And there we go. So we should have Professor Danner here. Hi, Professor Danner. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but this won't allow my camera to work. Interesting.
Oh, that's okay.
So I'm happy to respond by video or by audio rather, if there are any questions.
Awesome. Yeah. So let me ping the help desk about that, and we can just go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So the first question for you, Professor Danner, is from Aaron. What was it like when you first used the design process? Did you use it or view it differently than you do now?
Great question, Aaron. I didn't even know what it was called when I first started doing this. And the reason for that is that it felt somewhat intuitive that if you were trying to figure out the solution to a problem, you would first try to understand it as fully as you could and probably get as close to the people who experienced it most directly, right? So I didn't have labels for it when I first did this. And I also knew whether I was building a business or designing a course or creating a paper or writing a book, that it was all fundamentally, to some extent, kind of like the scientific method, dumbed down a little bit. In other words, you started off with a set of assumptions or hypotheses. You needed to figure out whether you were right or wrong, and if so, how right or how wrong you might be. And the only way you can do that is by trying things. So I started off uninformed about the labels, but intuitively it felt right. As I've done it more and more and more over the years, I've put a little bit more system to it, if you would, but the fundamentals haven't changed much.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that answer. So the second question comes from Brittany.
I can read it. Actually, Gloria, I've got it on the side. Now I can see the question, so you don't need to read them. I've got them.
Awesome. Okay, go for it.
So Brittany, what was it that motivated me? Any advice if you're interested in the field? What motivated me is curiosity. Curiosity and a desire to make sure that some of the ideas that I had could actually make a difference in the world. Nothing more profound than that. And design in that context, as entrepreneurship for me, was a means to accomplish those two objectives: satisfy my curiosity and hopefully do so in a way that might benefit people other than me. The primary advice I'd have, if you're interested in this, is read, try, experiment, try it on for size, do it as often as you can. Treat yourself as a designer in the process, and try to solve different problems using this design thinking approach. You'll get smarter and faster, you'll get more confidence in yourself, and you'll begin to conquer one of the biggest obstacles that all of us face when we're doing this kind of work, and that is the fear of failure, the fear of trying. So my advice is jump in, just try it, do it a lot. Allison, let's see. Allison, very informative presentation. Thanks. In your experience, how has this process been applied in your own life? Have you created a product using this process? Yep, I have several. I've designed with a partner a national newspaper, a national business newspaper in healthcare earlier in my career. I've built a number of businesses using this particular approach. I've written 2 books using this particular approach, one of which is probably more relevant than the other in this context. I did a book called The Other F Word on failure, on how smart teams, leaders, and entrepreneurs put failure to work. And if you're interested in design, you're going to have to get comfortable with failure. It's going to be your dance partner in the design process. And as I suggested in my remarks, failure can be one of your best teachers. It's one of your best resources. So, yep, I do what I say when it comes to design thinking. Let's see, Allison, we've got Grant. Hold on. When you have a good idea, you want to share, present to the public for a business or something similar, what are the next steps to making your idea successful, prevalent? I'll tell you, Grant, maybe 2 or 3 ideas for you rather than one. The first is to simplify your story as much as you can. And I use the term story because as human beings, we respond to stories. We remember stories. And stories well done have an opportunity to put emotion into what we are trying to basically convince somebody to either try or buy or use or think. So think about how you can change your or translate your idea into a story that is interesting and compelling and memorable. It will have the advantage of also simplifying what it is you're talking about. Second, try to make it visual. Try to make it as visual as you can. If you're a fan of TED Talks, one of the things that makes TED Talks so powerful are the power of the graphics that TED speakers often rely upon. And there's a particular person who has done a lot of work behind the scenes at TED named Nancy Duarte, Duarte. Check out her work. It's pretty helpful in terms of this issue of how do you make your ideas successful and prevalent. And then the last suggestion is the word that I used earlier, which is translate. You need to translate your idea into terms that mean something to the audience that you're talking with. They don't understand your language. You need to understand theirs and translate your idea, your design into terms that suggest that how they will benefit from the design you have in mind. Okay, Mike Epps, is the design process well known in schools and colleges? It's becoming a lot better known. I don't think it's necessarily in the common parlance universally, but compared to even as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, it is much, much more visible in curricula, both on its own terms, as well as involved in other courses that might not carry the name design. But design thinking has certainly become a very major trend in colleges and universities and high schools around the world. That owes a lot to Stanford University, much as I hate to compliment our arch rival from Berkeley. But the Stanford Design School really kind of set the mark and became a model for many other institutions of higher education. Vanessa, what would you say is a best practice for implementing entrepreneurial thinking to other fields? For example, working in a tech company. Well, I'll give you the definition of entrepreneurship that I use. Entrepreneurship is the pursuit and creation of business opportunity beyond the resources you control. The creation and pursuit of a business opportunity beyond the resources you control. What does that mean? That means almost by definition, the ticket is ingenuity. How can you be more resourceful? How can you think about using resources in new ways? How can you think about maybe changing how you look at a particular business idea or a business opportunity in a way that other people haven't yet. Amazon is a great example of a company that continually re-examines its own business elements, almost like Lego blocks. So that's a great way to start. The second is to remember that when you're an entrepreneur, you are in the business of creating value for others. And it's not good enough to just think about how the world might be better off with your idea. Your job is to figure out how that idea is actually going to both create value that people are willing to buy in the outside world, and to do so in a way that allows you to stay in business. In other words, where your revenue can at least cover your costs and hopefully do a little bit more than that. So be thinking about where value opportunities are lying in the outside marketplace that a company is not yet responding to. How might you begin to do that by rearranging resources, looking at the problem a little bit differently? And then ultimately, how you're going to satisfy the sustainability test. I don't mean that just in environmental terms. I mean it in financial terms. I use a phrase with my entrepreneurship students that goes like this: cash flow is more important than your mother. Now, that's a pretty bold statement. Cash flow is more important than your mother. But what I mean by that is that businesses depend on cash flow. They depend on money coming in faster than it has to go out the door. If you want to be an entrepreneur, understand cash flow and how it connects to the solution you're trying to design. Talia, what do I think is the most exciting design or project? Oh, the most exciting design or project I've done. Well, let me think. Most exciting project that I've done. I'll give you. I think I'll say this. It's the book that I wrote with one of my colleagues from Berkeley, called The Other F Word. It's a book on failure, and I now teach a course at Princeton on failure, and I do it at Berkeley as well. The reason I like that in particular is because it took an issue that is a taboo for most people around the world, and we tried to think about how we can create a way in a book and with some ideas and metaphors and frameworks and tools, how we can help people turn failure from what it always is, which is a regret, into something which it truly can be, which is a strategic resource. So that would be my own candidate. Have I always been interested in entrepreneurship? Yeah, even before I could spell the word, Yuvna. I apologize, by the way, for probably mispronouncing your name. But yeah, the short answer is I have been since I was in grade school. When I was in college, I helped start a business that basically did foreign language translation, library research, and consumer research for college, using college students all over the Boston area. That was my first real dose of entrepreneurship, and since then I've been involved in entrepreneurship pretty much throughout my career, even in the public sector, working in politics.
Crash.
Olivia, what's your experience with setbacks and things not going to plan? Do you have any tips or stories to be helpful to us? Yeah, I wrote a book about that very issue, this question of failure. Whether you're a designer, an entrepreneur, or any kind of person trying to change the status quo, you are going to be dealing with setbacks and defeat and failure. And as frustrating and painful and isolating and depressing as that can be, it is also part and parcel of the importance of what you're trying to do. You're trying to change things. The world doesn't like change very often. You need to be confident in yourself, but also humble in your own ideas. Because when an idea of yours is not working, chances are it may be something that's not quite right with how you've approached the problem, or how you've described the problem, or how you're delivering the problem. So you need to be humble and confident at the same time. And it's sometimes you go back and forth between those two things. If you think about a lot of successes in the business world in particular. It's always great to applaud them after they've happened. But oftentimes when you look behind the scenes at some of those successes, they were the result of serendipity as much as they were the results of strategy. Some of the most important inventions in the world have been accidents, have been people that simply kept their eyes and ears open to new things that they didn't expect, but discovered along the way. And if you have the spirit of inquiry and discovery, and you're open to picking up new ideas along the way, it may be a nice fallback resource for you to keep in mind when you encounter failures directly yourself. Aditya, how can one in the modern day ensure innovation is ethical? Innovation such as social media technology has clearly been very helpful to the world, but it's had some very negative downsides too. My own answer to this one is actually very simple. And that is, you have to be able to always look in the mirror yourself. You have to be able to say, here's an idea that I'm working on that I think is good, that I think is important, but is it truly in line with my own values, with my own ethics? Or if I were a person who wasn't perhaps as well financed as I am, maybe as well educated as I am, how would that person react to this very idea? Are they better off with my idea or not? In other words, look outside your idea to evaluate what the impacts of it are on people that may not look like you, talk like you, live nearby you. And oftentimes that can be a very useful way to keep yourself honest and keep your organization honest and focused on the things that really matter that you would be proud of. Ivan, how much time do you use designing and brainstorming? How much time do you use experimenting and engineering? No easy formula there, Ivan, sorry. I wish I could say 10% and 80%. What I would tell you is maybe a better way to think of it is a cycle that repeats itself, right? In other words, you're never stopping brainstorming. You're never stopping designing in order to experiment and engineer, because each one of those steps is informing the others. And you need to be prepared after you've carried out an experiment to go back into the brainstorming and the redesigning. Why? Because you've just tried something that didn't quite work, but you came close perhaps. So what is it that was on the edge that didn't work? And change that dimension of it. So in effect, you're brainstorming, but you're brainstorming on your previous ideas. So it gets more refined, hopefully. It gets more focused, hopefully. And sometimes it's even helpful when you discover that the very idea you've been spending all this time on just is not going to work, and you need to scrap it and think very, very differently. So it's less of a linear process and more of a cyclical process that repeats itself with different materials and different dynamics each time. VJ, hi, how would you compare your work to engineering and computer science? Seems you need some skills beforehand with the examples you gave in the keynote. Also, in your opinion, does the design process only apply to products and objects or to other things as well? Let me answer the last question first. We live in a designed world. Think about your day. Think about what you're doing right now. What's in your room right now? What you're sitting on, what you're using. Think about your life during the day. You are dealing with designed experiences, designed objects, designed services, designed facilities, designed buildings. We live in a designed world. Now, sometimes those designs are haphazard and not well thought out, but they're everywhere. So your opportunities to apply design thinking are as big as the reality in which you are living or the reality that you might want to create for the future. How would you compare my work to engineering or computer science? I don't, although I teach in the engineering department at Princeton, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a computer scientist. My work with folks who are has led me to conclude that, formulas and codes and blueprints are simply other examples of the application of some of the issues we talked about earlier in my talk. They are designs. They're intellectual designs, they're mechanical designs, physical designs, but they're designs. And they go through the same kind of process if they're going to be successful. Do you need skills before? Yeah, it's always nice to have some skills, but don't overstate it. A lot of times, the best examples are common sense examples. They're things that were created by people that didn't have college degrees, that didn't go to all the right courses. They just trusted themselves. They had good instincts. They were willing to learn and to discover. Edward, I know Professor Danner talked about the steps and actions to take during the design process based upon your experience. What are some of the pitfalls you've seen many younger entrepreneurs fall into? What resources or places can you recommend to someone who's further interested in the topic? Okay. One of the biggest pitfalls is not listening to people. Literally not listening to customers, not listening to colleagues, not listening to potential investors, but most of all, not listening to customers. I came across an acronym very recently that I love. It's called WAIT, W-A-I-T. You know what it stands for? Why am I talking? Think about that for a second. It's a wonderful, wonderful acronym to have in the top of your mind when you're an entrepreneur. Listen to customers. Listen to your colleagues. Listen to what they're saying. The mistake that many entrepreneurs make is they fall in love with their own idea too soon and too rigidly. The world is out there trying to teach them some lessons, trying to give them some insight. Oftentimes they need to sit back and watch and observe. That's where that empathize step in design thinking becomes so important. The name again is Nancy Duarte, D-U-A-R-T-E, Nancy Duarte. She's the person who is behind many of those TED Talks that you guys are probably liking so much. Okay, let's see. I hope I've answered at least some of these questions along the way. Sorry that the camera is not cooperating in this particular format, but hopefully you can hear me. Gloria, Sahil?
Yes, we can hear you, Professor Danner.
Okay, do we have more or are we done?
So it looks like
I'm sorry. I stopped too soon. Katie, first of all, let me find out how long do we have? Do we have another 5 minutes?
I think we're actually getting ready to wrap up. In case you wanted to say any closing remarks, we're planning on starting the ideation workshop very shortly in a different session.
Then let me just apologize to Katie and Allison and Yuvna again and Darren and Ella and et cetera, et cetera. I'm sorry we didn't have enough time to get to all of your questions, but I wish you well during the day. Hopefully some of these ideas will help you. I'm looking forward to hearing what the results are. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Danner, for sharing all of your insight. So all of you can feel free to head to, again, the reception to check in with the ideation workshop. And again, please feel free to hang on to your questions to ask your interactors later on. Thanks so much, guys.
Yes, just for your reference, for anyone watching, attend the ideation workshop, which is in a different session now. And if you need any other help, feel free to go to the help desk.
Okay, so
okay, folks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Danner. That was a wonderful keynote.
Let me know how it all turns out. It turns out I've got when I think when are you doing your finals this afternoon?
3 to 4.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I cannot make that, but if I can, I'll drop in.
Awesome. And yeah, thank you so much once again. And the crowd really loved you and thought that your speech was inspirational. So
I hope so.
that was very, very good response from the crowd.
Hope it helps. See you guys later.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks so much. Okay.
Cool. So yeah, let's see who else is here because they shouldn't be. If you are still here and you are not part of Ignite STEM, please go to the ideation workshop, which is a different session. Alfred, are you still here? No. Okay. There's one other person.
How can you see?
I'm doing like something really crappy. It like gives me a notification saying someone entered, and then I just kind of base it on that. Okay, it looks like one other person might be watching, but if you want, you can stick around. I might go and just go to the help desk to take over from Katie.
Yep, yeah, that sounds good. I'll probably go to
Thanks,
the
Claire.
ideation
Appreciate
workshop.
it.
Yeah, see you.